Pranam. I'm here with Japjeet Kaur from Miri Piri Academy. My name is Guruamrit Kaur from Sikh Dharma International, and we're just delighted to be here today speaking with her. And she's going to be discussing some wisdom and advice from Sikhi and from Kundalini Yoga and from all of her life's wisdom and work at the school regarding, just some perspective on for parents on raising children and raising teenagers. So our first question is, what are the most common challenges that you see among children or teenagers, or both, ideally?
Okay, what are the challenges? There are so many, and they're always morphing and changing according to the times. So I would imagine that a lot of parents are seeing challenges with their teenagers around electronics, spending a lot of time on electronics, possibly getting into pornography in a lot of cases for boys. For girls, possibly the electronics, getting into obsessive focus on looks and on social image. This would be a very modern challenge. And then because of all the reliance on electronics, not engaging with peers and with adults socially, losing some of the ability to connect to people in real life, and replacing it with video games, replacing it with movies, fantasy, that kind of thing. I would say that's probably a major challenge for teenagers, for children, and for parents at this particular moment in time. Related to that comes a whole bunch of other challenges. Kids and teenagers not exercising enough, being disconnected from their bodies. And when you're disconnected from your bodies, then your diet gets all, you don't have a relationship with food and how it feels in your body. So that can get really out of whack. The kind of disembodied people that we're seeing in the world right now, will have a lot of anxiety issues and other things because they're just not at home and comfortable in their body. So issues for kids and for teenagers are basically the same as they are for adults. And there's myriad, there's a range of them, and they keep on morphing and adjusting. But the good news is that the solutions for most of them are the same. And the solutions are to live a healthy lifestyle. And a lot of the things that we have in place at MPA are really the fundamental components of what you need to be healthy, happy, and holy, and what the Sikh Dharma and Kundalini Yoga lifestyle lays out. So making sure that you have a routine, that you're going to bed at a certain time, that you're getting up early, that you're exercising, that you're eating well, that you have community, that you have a meditation practice, that you have challenge in your life, that you have enough interaction, that you have enough diversity, enough experience. Teenagers, kids, they need a ton of experience. So if you're not providing that in their environment, then they're going to look for that in electronics and in other things. So making sure that there's a lot of engaging activities for your children will help, drag them away from the electronics. But like I said, all these there's a whole bunch of things that every adult or every human being needs, every teenager, every child needs to be healthy, happy, holy. They don't really change over time too much, which is nice. And they definitely take care of a lot of the challenges that people face. As parents, it's really difficult because so many of the issues are societal. It's not, there's what you want to create and deliver in your own home. And then there's the reality that you live in a society with a lot of other things happening. So you might not want your child to be on electronics that much, but when their friends are, then there's a lot of pressure in that regard to let them also engage in that way. So it's a very difficult situation, and it really requires a shift in consciousness amongst a whole group of people. So if you live in a dharmic community, if you live in a conscious community, then there's an opportunity for working together to create an environment and expectations that everyone, or that some basic expectations and values that people can get on board with and behind. But it's a very challenging situation. So a school like MPA, Miri Piri Academy, is really useful in this regard because we have a set of values and we have a program that really allows teenagers to be healthy, happy, and holy, and where it's shared by the mission of the school and by the board of directors and by the staff that are on the ground there. And having that cohesion of values and mission really helps create that continuity and expectations across the board. And then it's also helpful for the teenagers, because where a parent might have a really hard time setting limits on electronics, the school has an easier time on that, because we set a policy, it applies to everyone, and we're not going to get into that like back and forth about, a student can complain and they can whine about it, but we're not going to change the policy. And so it can be helpful, an institution like MPA can be really helpful in these regards, because it's just easier for us to be impersonal about a policy like that or about an approach like that. And we're not going to get as wrapped up. And, children are really good at pressing the exact buttons of their parents, even other adults in their life. They're very, very, very good at it. But when it's a unified effort from a whole group of adults, it can be a little bit easier to enforce and to stick with.
Thank you. I think that absolutely that covers a lot of really great ground, and I think that these are things that a lot of people are dealing with right now, and so I really appreciate you speaking to those things, because this is a hard time, especially when it comes to the areas that you pointed out, and so
and there's other areas, other challenges of being a teenager, especially in the West, like the sexualization of teenagers, especially girls, but I think increasingly so males. You see, it used to be that eating disorders were primarily a female issue that could come up, and the rate in young males now is really, really high. So these are societal things. It's really hard to create an environment that protects children from all that, which is, again, one of the reasons why Sri Singh Sahib set up a school in India, is to give a little bit of protection from that overly sexualized Western culture, which even now with the internet, that's not even a real barrier. So these are very difficult challenges that everyone's facing, and really the approach to it needs to be unified, and parents need to support each other, and we need to have institutions that give the kids an opportunity to be themselves.
Yes, absolutely. Really appreciate you bringing in all of that different perspective and that wisdom, and the experience and what you've seen at the school. And so this is sort of, I think you've already kind of brought up a lot of a lot of this was addressed in the first question, but just before we move on, wanted to see just if you had any kind of positive or helpful ideas or tips for how parents can help their teens navigate the life challenges that they encounter, some of the challenges that you mentioned. And I think you already kind of discussed that a lot. In the case there's anything you wanted to add kind of on that before we move forward.
Yeah, the main way that adults or parents can help their teens navigate these things is to talk directly to them, to have open communication with them about the benefits, about the pitfalls, about the dangers of certain behaviors and ways of doing things. So that needs to be constant and very open relationship between you and your child, to be upfront about pornography, to be upfront about other issues that they're going to be facing. I find that it's not teenagers or children that have a problem with talking about these things. They're very comfortable. They're very happy to talk about things like sex. It can be the adults that are reluctant or that are resistant to that. So really the way to support your children is to be open with them, to be direct, to share from your own experience, and to be very real and truthful with them.
Thank you. Absolutely. That's such a basic thing, but I think it's something that can often get lost in the shuffle, and it's so important. So thank you for sharing that. And so this is also sort of in a related note or a related line of thought, but finding a balance can be difficult for many parents. So sort of in the sense of how can parents allow teens to grow in their independence while still providing boundaries that protect them?
Yeah, it's a really important question. And you're right that it's totally a balance. So I think of a lot of things in life as that double-edged sword. It's like a little bit too much this way and it's a problem, a little bit too much that way it's a problem, and it's a constant adjustment to get really that tip of the edge of the double-edged sword. So absolutely, kids need independence, and they need, we talked about that in the previous section, how important it is for them, for their confidence, for their ability to handle challenges when they're older and they're adults. They're not going to learn these things automatically or overnight if they are not given the opportunities along the way to develop that trust in themselves and to develop independence away from their parents. So absolutely, that's fundamental to their development, is learning that independence and not being dependent on their parents. At the same time, you want to protect them from a lot of these things in the world. You want to protect them, and it's your job to make sure that they're in safe environments. And so, yeah, finding that balance is really tricky, because you can't protect them so much that you're sheltering them, that you're smothering them, that they can't leave the house, or that they're completely restricted and unable to grow. So yeah, what do you say? It's a case by case basis, and it's a moment to moment basis of trying to find that right balance. Again, an option like Miri Piri Academy is really good because we have a lot of control over the environment that we create there, to give them independence from their parents, to give them that confidence in themselves to meet challenges of just daily living on their own. And so if you send your child to a school like MPA, then you're giving them that opportunity to learn independence in a place that's very safe, because we can cover and we can make sure that things like alcohol, drugs, etc., are not present there. And our ability to control is becoming a little, can become less and less with electronics. But again, we have policies in place that try to protect the kids from in that realm too. But yeah, so sending your child to a place like MPA is a good option for giving them the opportunity to grow, meet challenges, be independent from their parents in an environment that is still very protected.
Thank you. Yes, I absolutely really appreciate you sharing all of that kind of perspective from the school. And I think it's kind of is more of an art than a science, probably.
It's definitely an art, and it's like, again, it's every issue, it's every day, it's to find that right balance, and you're just constantly correcting, and you really have to be paying attention. And so as parents, the more, I know a lot of parents are very overwhelmed, if both parents are working or single parent families, it can be hard just to have any space to even look at things properly. And really, parents know what the best course of action is, or they know who to talk to get advice on things. First, they just need some space to be able to look at the situation. And that can be the real challenge, is just to find a space in their life to meditate, to be calm, to be centered, so that they can find that right balance. That's more where the challenge is just finding that space in their life.
Absolutely. Yeah, just being able to kind of break away a little bit and see things from a little bit of a higher view, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's so difficult. It's so difficult with your children to get that higher view, because we tend to be quite attached, and we tend to place a lot of expectation and burden on the children in that way, which is why, again, after a certain age, it's really beneficial to have a child venture out into the world, into somewhere like MPA, so that they can grow on their own outside of the expectations of the parents, and that it's easier for other adults to be neutral with their children, with other people's children, and to again come up with policies, come up with general approaches that can be very balanced. And because we sit and we discuss them and we talk about them in a group of caring adults, and we try to find that right balance, and it's a group effort, and it's a constant, we have meetings almost every day trying to adjust and make sure that we're getting the right balance with these things. And it really takes the eyes and the space to watch the kids and observe how different policies, how different actions, how different approaches are affecting them, and just be ready to constantly change and adjust.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that flexibility is key. And yes, thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else kind of in this line that you wanted to discuss before we continue forward?
not sure if it's useful, but I think another double-edged sword is that sometimes parents don't trust themselves, that, you know, if a child comes through you, they chose to come through you, and they chose all the karmas that come with that, and they chose for you to be their support and their guide in their life. So it's a good place to start in trusting your own self. And I see parents often doubting themselves and doubting their actions. So I feel like that's really important. And at the same time, to be humble enough to look to others for support and guidance when you need it. So if you're running into a problem, you know, and you don't know how to handle something, that you can go to somebody else and ask for their advice and their feedback. And that's what being part of a Sangha is, in a community, is that there's others that you can go to that might have more experience or might have a different vantage point on the situation than you do. And so again, that's another double-edged sword of really for parents to trust themselves, but also get advice and help when they need it.
Thank you. I think that's really beautiful. And yeah, thank you. I think that's just a really beautiful kind of reminder and a really beautiful take on things that I think we can all really appreciate. Yeah, so let's see. So next question, and all these questions kind of relate, but the next question is sort of going to concept in Sikhi of the 5 thieves of lust, anger, greed, pride, and attachment. These are identified kind of as universal challenges in the human psyche. And these challenges, you know, of course, they present probably at all phases of life, but are perhaps a little bit more intense during the adolescent years. And so the question is, how can parents support adolescents in growing through these challenges and in forging a connection with the Guru during this time of their life?
It's a very big question. Also, the purpose of it having a spiritual path is that it really provides the guidance in this regard. Everything that happens on a spiritual path is to help contain the five passions. So for parents, the main place to start is with yourself, and make sure that you're doing practices and living a lifestyle that helps you keep that under control, and that you have a constant relationship with those aspects of yourself, and are, you know, have methods for elevating that. So that's really the first place to start, because again, kids and teenagers really pick up values, and they really pick up habits from their parents and from their environment. So starting with yourself is really the best place, rather than pointing a finger at a child and saying, why are you doing that? Really, they're just most of the time copying the parents and what their real values and are. So primary place to start is with yourself. So yeah, I'm going to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a very wise kind of lens to view that through.
And the other place to go with it is to talk about these things. So talk about what lust, anger, greed, pride, and attachment are, to explain how they show up in your life, how you as an adult have learned to navigate that, and really in that way be a guide and a support for your children when they're going through and being confronted with those things. So again, being very direct with your kids, being very upfront, helping to give them values by explaining what the consequences of certain behaviors and actions are, is one of the best ways that you can support and guide them.
Yes.
In terms of forging a relationship with Guru during this time, I think the place to start there is to recognize that they already have a relationship with God and Guru. And that's, you know, the place to start for ourselves individually. It's not something that's over there, it's within us, and that it already exists. So it's not about having to build that connection, but just recognize the connection. And again, as parents, the best way to do that is by having that relationship yourself and providing the environments for your children to experience that and to talk about it in a very normal way on a regular daily basis.
Yes, thank you. That's very beautiful and definitely resonates for me.
Yeah, and just be natural about it. However it makes sense to you, however you express it, however you experience it. It's better to just be authentic with that, versus having something in your head about what you're trying to achieve. Really, again, children and teenagers are just going to look to you as a role model, and they're going to pick up on what your true beliefs are around that. And so being as authentic as possible with yourself and then with your children is the best approach.
Yes, absolutely. And I think especially teenagers can probably kind of sense when adults are not being authentic, and so I think that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Teenagers will definitely call you on that. They will call you out anytime they sniff hypocrisy. So again, try not to come at them with, you should do this, or this is how it is. More just have your life be the guide and the model. And even in cases where you're not living up to your own expectations, you can explain that and be authentic and real with your kids about that. And they'll appreciate that. And they'll appreciate when you come from your heart, and when you come from your experience, and when you come from your truth.
And so I think that grappling with the ego, or home, is a theme that often emerges kind of in these years, as you know, during these formative years. And so the question is, how can teens find balance between their ego and their own divinity during this phase of life?
So this question kind of points to why we have spiritual paths, because this is one of the goals of being on a spiritual path, is to find this balance between your ego, which is your sense of self and individuation, and your divinity and the infinity and the unknown. So the primary relationship between a parent and a child is that the child is a gift from God. Child is not your possession, they're not your pet, they're not your sense of well-being. And if you get the relationship right, then pretty much all your actions after that will flow properly. So if you recognize that your child is a gift from God, that your child has their own innate intelligence, that the guru lives within them, then you're going to be able to guide and support that child in a healthy and appropriate manner. If you don't know what the proper relationship is, then you might start engaging in behaviors that are not as healthy for the child. So you can see in some instances, parents buying their children anything that they want and trying to sort of buy their love through material possessions. That was something that the Serious Thing side was really, when I researched lectures on Miri Piri Academy from the archives, that was something that he went over and over again, just talking to the parents about not sending their kids big packages and all this stuff, that's not the best way to connect with them and support them. Really being, as a parent, as an adult, being in your own divinity, in your own centeredness, and recognizing the child as a gift from God, that you're here to support them in their journey through life, but really that the intelligence of that journey lies within them is a good place to start, and that your actions, when flowing from there, will be in correct alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very, very beautiful. Let's see. So this question also kind of connects to what we've talked about, but the phase of adolescence, I think, for some of these reasons that we've mentioned, can sometimes bring some turbulence, impulsiveness, and at times risk-taking behavior. How can wisdom from Sikhi, yogic practices bring calm and stability to families during this phase of life of raising teenagers?
Again, like most things, if they're showing up at the time when the child is a teenager, the roots of it came much earlier. So really, to teach children calmness, you need to start when they're in the womb, and you need to meditate when your child is, I shouldn't say you need, just ideally, when you're preparing to have a child, you would also be meditating and teaching them how to create that calmness at that point in time. And then by having calm environments that they grow up in their whole life. So calm and cozy environments. When they get to the age of being a teenager and they do need intensity, they do need challenge, they do need excitement, they need fun, they need variety. These are needs that they have. So they're not wrong. They're absolutely not wrong. They're completely a natural part of development, and they should be recognized as such. And parents need to build in opportunities for intensity and for challenge and for growth, so that the child, the teenager, is able to confront their limits and feel who they are. So it's not to get rid of any dangerous situation or any challenge. It's to make sure that you're including that in their life, so that they don't have to go and do something completely risky over here. If they have enough intensity and challenge in their life on a daily basis, then they're not going to do something so extreme. Or it might look extreme to you, but it's just the next step in their pushing their limits. So for me, like, I'm not going to jump off a cliff, into the, that would be very kind of like extreme for me. But for like a 14-year-old boy who's been doing that, does it, 100 times in one day, that's not like, when they do the next thing, that's not, they know their limits, they know their body, they know that they can handle, they've investigated the water, they are aware of their surroundings, then it's not really risk-taking behavior. It can look that way to us, but it's just the next pushing of limits to them. So recognizing that they need to push their limits, that they need that challenge, and that if it goes kind of sequentially and they are aware of themselves in the process, it's not dangerous, and that it should be encouraged, and that you need to create opportunities for them to challenge themselves and to engage in intense behaviors.
That makes sense. Yes, thank you for sharing that.
And really, up until, you can also create policies around it. Just like if you're going to rent a car, it's not till 25 that anybody wants to rent a car to a young person, because they know that's when the frontal lobe is developed and risk-taking behaviors are mitigated at that point. So you can also, that it's not to not set up policies or expectations, to also make sure that you limit and make sure that the realm of behavior is within a safe limit. But I think as parents, sometimes, especially on the women's side, what can feel risky is not that risky. But so you have to also just kind of confront yourself and make sure that you're not putting undue fear and worry onto a child's behavior. They found that in the 80s, when they started saying that playgrounds were unsafe and they started making them safer, they're finding that kids break their arms or have more injuries now than before, because they never learned how to fall correctly. They never learned how to, the parents were so, worried about safety, and that they're sheltering them from this natural growth process where they would learn how to fall in a way that wouldn't hurt themselves, or they would go on that top, level of whatever when they're ready for it. And so really, like, the children, if you let them guide the process, and if you're there supporting and guiding it, but you're really letting the inspiration and the impetus come from them and trying to get your fears in check, then they're going to be able to kind of test their limits and grow and develop in that way that is just going step by step.
I think that's very, very beautiful, and kind of just, building the foundation and setting them up for success in that way, just based on their own inner knowing, is very, I think, very wise. So thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, really on anything that we've talked about today? I think our conversation has really been, encompassed a lot of ground, and we really appreciate it.
Well, I'm looking at the picture of Guru Gobind Singh here. And really, the model in Sikhi is to give a lot of autonomy and to young people, and a lot of faith and trust in them, that they are also the light of God, and that that light that is within each of us is also with them, and let that guide them. So when Guru Gobind Singh's sons were prepared to give their life in battle, or he didn't stop that, and their mother didn't stop that. So giving them, they're intelligent human beings, and treating them as such is really the model of Sikhi kind of throughout. You know, we have gurus that are 5 years old. You know, that's very, you know, very poignant, and something that we should learn from is that young people, yes, they're, you know, they're not fully developed. Maybe their hormones are all over the place and they do need guidance, but they do have that light of God in them. And that should be like the fundamental starting place, is that they're a gift from God. They have God within them, and that your job as parents and as adults in their life is to support them and guide them through the process, but really trusting in them and trusting their own divinity.
Wow, thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, what a beautiful note to kind of bring it all together on. And so yeah, we just you know, we're just so grateful to you, Japjeet, for joining us and for sharing all of this beautiful wisdom and this amazing perspective that you're bringing. So yeah, we just want to say thank you so much. We're so grateful to you. Yeah, for joining us today and for sharing all of this.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I hopefully something I said will resonate with somebody. And if anybody needs to know more about Miri Piri Academy, you can always contact me. Hopefully my information will be shared, and blessings to everyone.
Satnam.